In the interest of it already being a long evening, this has been a wonderful Shabbat. I hope those of you who are visiting us for the first time or who have been visiting us over the summer and you are ready to become part of this Kehilah Kedoshah, this holy congregation, understand that there has been enormous pressure this week for me and rabbis throughout the country to speak about what happened last Saturday on the East Coast. And I know a lot of us are very anxious about what's going to happen this Tuesday when the president comes to Arizona. But it's not appropriate on New Member Shabbat to talk about these matters in too great a detail and depth. I do want to say, I learned a very important lesson after the Columbine massacre back in 1998. I spoke on the Shabbat 4 days after Columbine, and I realized that that was a mistake. I think that all of us together would agree, I hope, that what happens to us as a country and as individuals when we are impulsive, when we feel the need to respond so quickly without giving ourselves a chance to breathe, to mourn, and to psychologically, on some level, recover from tragedy, is a very, very painful process to watch. This has been a painful week, not just because of what happened last weekend. It's been a painful week because if any of us had any uncertainty before this week, our country is deeply divided, deeply broken, and very clearly there are many in our society who are deeply, deeply hurting. And those are not issues of politics or of partisanship. Those are issues of what it means to be a human being in 2017 in a world that has gone, as they say in Yiddish, upside down. And the 24-hour news cycle does not help it. And social media makes it worse. It would not be abnormal or unusual given the amount of information that comes out of an event such as this, and this is way different than Columbine because during Columbine there was no Facebook. Would make any normal person feel irrational thoughts, feel catastrophic thoughts, and feel scared. And therefore, to speak about what has happened in our country these last few days since that incident, I believe, would be irresponsible for me as a rabbi because I have not yet processed it. There are many good sound bites out there. And there are many, many things that we either agree with or vehemently disagree with. And there are many heroes, and there are many villains. But let us agree on one thing, friends, on this Shabbat. That when it comes to Nazism, when it comes to people who are filled with hatred toward our people, post-Holocaust, that the rules are different than they ever were before. There cannot be equivocation. To be a Jew means that we are all responsible. We are all responsible of reciting the sacred vow, never again. And that means that any time, any place, anywhere, someone carries the swastika on a flag or a pin or chants anti-Semitic, anti-black, anti-Hispanic, and anti-gay words, it is our responsibility to stand up for them. Call it cosmic, but this week's Torah portion, Re'eh, teaches us that very lesson. To be a Jew means you do not have a choice when it comes to speaking against those who hate us, who want us dead. Take them very seriously. That's what it means to be a Jew. This week's Parsha, Re'eh, says the following. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw it. It says in this week's Parsha, which is Deuteronomy chapter 11, "See, I am setting before you this day a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey commands from Adonai your God that I am giving you today, and the curse is if you disobey these commandments that Adonai is giving you this day. If you follow other gods," and then the Torah goes on to, if you follow false prophets. In other words, if you follow demagogues, that is a curse. And here's how God puts it later on when we read this on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, "See, I have set before you today life and good and death and evil. I call heaven and earth, you remember from Nitzavim, to witness again to you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, uvecharta b'chaim, therefore choose life, that you and your children and grandchildren may live." On this Shabbat, I just want to focus on two small parts. And then I want you to go home and talk about this. And try for this Shabbat for 24 hours to turn the television news off and to not go on social media. It's taking over our souls. This hatred and animosity and divisiveness, it is the curse, not the blessing. Take 24 hours this Shabbat off. Talk amongst yourselves. Talk with those you love. Have arguments. That's a very Jewish thing to do. Maimonides takes these two passages, the one from this week's Parsha and Netzavim, about choices between life and death and curse and blessing. He says these two passages prove that we believe in free will. But they're more than just free will, he says. Maimonides, 1,000 years ago, says these are also political statements. The connection between individual freedom, which Maimonides is talking about, and collective choice, which is what Moshe talked about. Between free will and the choices we make altogether, he says, if humans are free, then they need a free society within which to exercise that freedom. The book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, represents the first attempt ever in the history of the world to create that ideal free society. And Moses, if you think about his vision, is political in a very unique way. Because it's the first time in the history of the world that Moses says, you as a collective body, you as a community of tribes, you get to choose your destiny as a group, which means you are all responsible for each other. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says there is no desire in Moses' words for fame or honor or expanding an empire. There is not a word of nationalism in a covenantal sense. Moses doesn't tell the people that they're so great, but he tells them that they have been rebellious. And they have made failures of faith, not only at the golden calf, but in the entire book of Numbers, which some of you didn't hear because you weren't here over the summer, but it's still there. Moses would not have won an election, by the way. In modern society, he was too much of a socialist. But what he says is he summons the people to be humble and to be responsible. He says, in effect, we are a nation, Rabbi Sachs concludes, that has been chosen by God for this grand experiment that he called Judaism and we call democracy. A great experiment where you can be as we put it, of the people and by the people, and as he puts it, a nation of priests and a holy people. Moses insists that we are free when we act and behave as if we are free enough to be responsible for each other. To be a nation means to be a place of rules and of law and of shared values. And we pray, I know, all of us on this Shabbat, that it will, again, be a shared value for our people and our nation, that our democracy will share the value, that there is no equivocation when it comes to hatred, and for us as Jews when it comes to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism for a Jew has no parallel equal. Slavery for a black person has no parallel equal in this country. Racism has no parallel equal for Hispanics and Asians and people from other countries. They don't. But we as a collective must agree that the value we must choose to believe that there are blessings and curses, and that there is nothing, no greater a curse than hatred of Jews, of blacks, of Hispanics, of gays, of lesbians. This hatred is the curse. And it is not only undemocratic, it is anti-democratic. On this Shabbat, as we all in our own ways process and think through and come to our own conclusions in the next few weeks, let us not be impulsive. I'm not saying think like I think, but I'm telling you to do what I did. Look to the Torah. It's there. There has been nothing more helpful for me, and I'm not just saying this because I'm your rabbi, this week, than to read from this week's Parsha and to learn that this idea for them of peoplehood and for us of democracy is the greatest idea for how to live and lead a society. To give all of us rights, but more importantly, the responsibility to have choices and ultimately to decide what our future will look like as a collective, and to be responsible for the outcomes of our decisions today on future generations. These are all tremendous burdens, but according to our tradition, a beautiful and dynamic idea, albeit challenging. I feel in my heart, as a Jew who stands here after 4,000 years of Jewish faith and tradition and heritage have been ongoing, as we welcome our new leaders of board members and our new leaders of our youth group, I know that the Jewish people, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people will live. And I also know in my heart of hearts that our democracy will live and survive this last week. But I also know that achieving that vision of that more perfect union for us as Americans, or of a life of Torah, God, and Israel for us of Jews, that living that life and the pursuit of that dream and the perfection of those ideals is just as much our responsibility today as it was for Moses or for Maimonides or for Washington or for Jefferson. It is as much our responsibility today. On this Shabbat, I pray for all of us that we can achieve this vision, a vision that never ceases to exist, that we be inspired by our ancestors, that we stand on their shoulders to carry us through this terrible time, that we give ourselves a break for this Shabbat and not listen to anything and turn the noise off because it's making us meshugana. And to have a Shabbat of rest and of peace. My friends, God will not fix this for us. But then again, God does not put us in these positions. God teaches us how to fix it. God shows us the right choices to make. And our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents are speaking to us now. Never again. Never again. Shabbat shalom. It's great to